Shut up, Tom. Sweat's pouring off my brow. Hello. Disc 2. This will be the disc here. This will be the hits.
Greatest
Went
hits.
to the B-side.
We're back again for a continuation of the interviews for members of Troop and Post 52. We have a new panel with us here now that I'd like to begin with some quick interviews, just kind of introduce yourselves, very briefly tell us what period of time you cover, and then give us a quick blurb of where you are today. Let's go ahead and start at the far end with Drew Etter. I'll pick up in a minute. Go ahead, Drew.
Thanks, Rob. I came into Post 52 in about 68, I guess, the latter part of 68. And let's see, did a few of the ski trips and did the Charles Sumner canoe-based trip, and then went off to college and then came back and forth and met some of the guys and talked here and there, but didn't go on any more trips after that. What I did in the Post, a lot of my contemporaries and buddies took active leadership roles, and I was more of the guy that they kind of pushed along. And as a matter of fact, I would not have gotten my Eagle had it not been for some of the guys in the Post, Barry and Homer and some others that said, Drew, you've got like 2 merit badges, why don't you just finish this thing up and do your project? And they helped me do that, and I'm glad I did. And that was a positive influence on me. There were a few other positive influences, and there were some influences that kind of took me in some other directions as well, but it was the 70s after all, and late 60s, and I don't remember a lot of them, but then they must have been fun. After the one thing I did do in a leadership role, I became the ceremonies chairman for a brief period for the OA, and that started a love in Indian lore for me, in crafts and things like that. Just really enjoyed that. As a matter of fact, I went to law school, UT Law School, took an Indian law course and spent one summer on the Navajo reservation. And it just really fostered a love for the Indian and their life and their way of life. But that's pretty much it for me, and turn it over to someone else.
Thank you, Drew.
I'm Robin Whitson. I started in the PAC in 1964, and I was in the PAC and then the Troop and then the Post. So I was around about 8 or 9 years that I was involved, and it was great experience, and a lot of what happened in scouting and in the Troop and the Post, I think it made a lot of where I've ended up in my life. I currently do family wealth management and business planning and that sort of stuff, investments and insurance and all the financial services part of this stuff, and I live in San Antonio now. Tommy?
Great. Hi, guys. I'm Tom Carr. I joined the unit the same year Sid Richardson Scout Camp opened up. There were several of us that worked at the camp that summer. Alan Edmonds and I grew up in Troop 103. We both had attained the rank of Eagle, and we were pretty excited about working at summer camp. I was like 14 at the time. And that summer, we met a Post member, Jerry Long, who said, hey, after summer camp, come join this group and participate in some of our meetings on Wednesday evening. And we did that, and we loved it, and got super active in the unit. Took a lot of trips. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I subsequently became Post president in roughly 70, 71. And like Drew and Rob and several others, I went on to law school and became an attorney. And I think being active with the unit, oh, I know this, being active with the unit, they were quite involved in the Order of the Era and would basically require us to be a little more be a little more outgoing and a little bit more positive about ourselves. And by doing that, we were able to go from there, and that's kind of why I went on to law school. And I'm practicing law, representing school districts. I'm pretty proud of my clients, school districts and colleges, and enjoying that quite a bit.
So we're responsible for you being outgoing.
Boy, I think
All we tried to do really was to tone him down,
Yeah.
you know,
I
but
think there
we
was
didn't succeed.
I think there was a fuse there, and y'all just lit it. Set me free. You tried. You tried.
I don't think Tom's fuse was ever put out. Kent?
Would you like for me to go through that introduction again?
Well, I guess we've already done you.
We have.
Now we'll skip over you.
All right.
We'll go to D.
I'm Dee Moore. I grew up in the neighborhood right around Trinity Episcopal Church, and so I was in elementary school, and a flyer came around and said, join Boy Scouts, and all of my classmates were joining, so I did. So I started in the Webelos group, and then moved on to the troop, and then on to the post. So it was with the unit from about 1965 through 1978.
Okay.
I'm Curtis Kane, and I came from Troop 50 in about 1968 over to the post, and I stayed for 3 years. I'm currently a uniform leader in Scouts. I've been in Scouting again since about 1992. I have an Eagle Scout son, and I'm a geologist. I live in Denver.
All right, very good. D, I don't think we got what you're currently.
Oh, well, for the last 27 years and on for the next 15 or so, I teach in the public schools.
Okay, very good. I wanted to start this session by talking a little bit about focus on Troop 52, and I know we have a couple people here who were involved with that troop, and let's talk about perhaps some of the summer trips or trips that they took. I think Kent has been on one of those, and I think you can't discuss the troop without discussing the bus also, so why don't we start there?
Yes, we took several trips, not actually being active members of the troop, but some of us that were in the post and also had worked on summer camp staff would just naturally not have had enough after 7 weeks of summer camp. So Jack was always willing to recruit staff members to come along on his summer camp trips and provide additional staff for Troop 52 and the activities that they would have and the escapades that they would have on their summer trips. So on a couple of occasions, I was fortunate enough to attend those trips. One specifically that I'm remembering was 1976 in the Spanish Peaks, which was one of Jack's very favorite places to go. We would camp there as far back in the campground as we could get and away from as many people as we could get. And speaking of the bus, I think the most memorable thing about the bus for me was the old school bus that we happened to have at that time was just seemed to break down on each and every trip that it managed to go on. But we had more fun as young adults being able to drive that bus and sing and pound the steering wheel like Jack would have done and sing along with the kids and just have a great time. And like I say, we always seem to have mechanical problems. And the thing I remember about that trip to the Spanish Peaks was we got all the way up into the mountains for the water pump to go out on that particular bus. And, of course, being 15, 20 years old at that point, the parts weren't exactly readily available right down the hill. So we found ourselves, I believe David Muller and myself, and Dean, you may have been along on that trip. When we went into town, we drove all the way to Pueblo to find a junkyard and climb inside its hood and remove a water pump to take it back up into the mountains and only hope that and pray that it would work when we got it installed on the bus. And sure enough, it did. For all I know, the same water pump is still on that bus wherever it is now. But we had a great time there. And, David, I believe the goat farm was along that road on the way up to the Spanish Peaks. So David Muller and Goat Farms go a long way for those of you that are aware of that. And there were probably dead goats there as well.
All right.
That's a disturbing thought.
Robin, can I get you to talk a little bit about your experiences in the troop itself? Just
Well, I started in the pack when I was in, I guess, 8 years old when you start, and I did the Cubs, and the pack met on Monday night, and the troop met on Tuesday night, and we'd drive by Trinity Episcopal, and there'd be all the big kids, the troop kids. So I grew up watching them, and they'd come to the pack meetings and do things, and it was a big deal. So I, of course, went from the pack into Webelos, and then from Webelos into the troop, and went, of course, started camping with the troop, and we were gone just about every weekend. And the bus at that point was the old silver Greyhoundish looking bus, and it broke down just like all buses. I think all buses for scout troops always break down. And we had the blue panel truck, and we weren't camping; we went hiking, and we always took a trip to Arkansas, and always took a trip to Worth Ranch, and always took a trip to Colorado. And then Sid Richardson opened, and so we took a trip up there. So if you went on all the trips, that was about 5 or 6 weeks out of the summer that you'd be camping with Jack and whoever it happened to be. And it was great. It was great. It was a chance to be out of town, to do our own thing, and basically be responsible for ourselves. And I think it was an important part of life. It was really fun. We had some great times, but the playing cards all night in Arkansas and Colorado. We built giant structures over the river with the trees and the wood, and we burned wood in the campfires up there, which was probably against the rules, but we'd go out and gather wood and burn wood and climb the peaks. We have a patch. We get to put the snow on the peaks if we climb.
Yeah, on the neckerchief.
On the neckerchief.
You'd put the patch on the neckerchief, and if you made it to the top, then you could get the white thread to put snow on it.
And along the way, we had beads for nights camping, and I was somewhere over 300 nights of camping at with the troop and eventually the post. So.
what was it like camping with Jack?
Jack, what was it like camping with Jack? It was an experience. Lots of songs. The food was never very good unless you figured out a way to do it. And as a consequence, I learned how to cook better than most people, and it was an experience. We had a great time, lots of singing and campfires, and we'd occasionally have kids go crazy, but it was an experience. I remember walking through camp one morning in Colorado, and there Jack is totally buck naked, shaving in the mirror of the panel truck, and that if you knew Jack, that was quite a sight.
Dee, do you have anything to add about camping with the troop?
Well, Jack had a standing rule. The patrols had to be at least 100 yards apart from each other. So in the mornings, if you were on staff with Jack, the objective in the morning was to go find the patrols, because if you came in at night, you'd see kids disappearing off into the bushes someplace, and you'd hear sounds of chopping and laughter, and occasionally somebody get mad and you'd hear yelling. But the big thing in the morning was, well, time to go find the patrols. Jack always liked comfortable camping. Somewhere in the mid to late 60s, Jack obtained a foam pad, about a 4-inch thick foam pad. And that became the style for the staff. Everybody had to have a 4-inch thick foam pad. And I must say, it sure does beat sleeping on anything else on the ground. In fact, I still have my foam pad. It's out in the garage, but I've got it. And it says, "More. Do not touch this pad. It is mine."
Good. We've had a couple of people join us now that I'd like to have introduce themselves and tell us your prior involvement and where you are today.
My name is David Mormon. I joined the Cub Scouts in about late of 65, September, I think, of 65. I was in the Webelos for about a year, and then I was in the troop for about, until about 70. I'm currently a retail manager. Been in retail for about 33 years. My involvement in the troop was I was one of those kind of guys. I was in when Robin was in, and I remember Dee real well too. We were, I was just one of those guys that kind of was in the patrols and learning about camping and really Jack had taught with my mother, and so I'd known Jack for quite a number of years, and he had tried to get me into the Cub Scouts and everything, and I didn't think I'd ever wanted to join that because I was into athletics and stuff. And what ended up happening, I ended up going to a flower war one time back about 65, and I think they had a red team and a white team, and after the flower war, I was pretty well sold on being in the troop, and being a part of that. It was there must have been 300 kids there, probably 150 kids on each side. And I remember, taking the flag away from the guys, and those guys getting mad at us, and then, coming back and taking our flag, and spending all day Saturday trampling through the grapevine and the stickers and stuff. And then after that, I was pretty well hooked and spent a lot of time camping. I did never make a Eagle Scout. I was a Life Scout, and I was working on my Eagle when I actually left the troop about late 70, I think.
Well, good. Then Barry Hudson.
My name's Barry Hudson. I was active in the post, I guess, really 68 through 75 or so. I came from Troop 50. Curtis Kane, John Augenbaugh, and I joined out of 50. Several other 50 members, Jerry Long, Larry Ivy, and David Potts as well came out of 50. But I guess the thing I always remember about the post is the Christmas tree lights and the ski trips. Those were because that happened every year. It was always a new experience, whether we were selling there at University in Barry or we moving the Christmas tree lot around. And, the different places we went skiing, we didn't have to have the best equipment. You skied in your jeans, with Scotch Guard, and we learned to ski, and it's lifelong friendships. Learned how to play bridge when we were at the Christmas tree lot. Some of us still play bridge once a month at Kairos afterwards. And I guess that's something that hadn't been mentioned yet is Kairos. After the post meeting every week, regardless of, sometimes we had real interesting programs. Sometimes they weren't quite as good as others, but we always had fellowship both in the post room and at Kairos afterwards. And it was like a fraternity for high school boys growing up in the post. It was close friendships that we've carried all these years with us.
Curtis, what do you remember about any post-trip, ski trips or anything like that?
Well, we always did things on the cheap, the real cheap. And I remember one of our trips, somebody got a hold of a van, had no seats. And I think we counted 12 or 13 boys lying side by side in the back of this van. And if anybody moved, it hurt everybody. We all screamed. And the condensation dripped off the roof of the van the whole way to New Mexico. And I don't know where we got into a blizzard somewhere. I think it was around Abbott.
Yeah, I think that was a Larry Ivy special, that it was cheaper to rent the cargo van without any seats.
Well, no
seats. Put all of our packs.
And we lay on our packs.
Laid on top of the packs. And we had the magazine box of magazines to read on the way. I think everybody knows the box of magazines I'm talking about. I don't know if the Post still has a collection of adult literature or not, but
Well, we got into a blizzard somewhere around Abbott, and I remember the van quit running, and we pulled off the side of the road, and it turned out the muffler was red hot, and it started a fire underneath the van.
started firing the van, and we thought that the gas tank was going to explode.
We had to push the van off the grass.
Yeah.
And then Chris Calloway shuttled us in his Chevy Impala. I don't know how many. There was people laying across our legs to get to where we were going.
Yeah, they'd bang on the door and, get out, get out. Well, the doors were locked, and so we couldn't pile out the
Couldn't
back.
pile out, yeah.
So we tried the side door. I think it slid open at that time. I can't recall exactly how it got out, but yeah, getting out, we were going, what's going on? Oh, you're on fire. Yeah,
In a
little
blizzard.
thing. It's just the muffler sitting there red hot, sitting on the side of the road in the dry grass. Started a little fire.
How about the time your brother?
Yeah, that was a later trip. Yeah, don't we look this from who if any mothers are going to be watching this, your kids are going to be safe, but turn off the DVD, the video at this point, because we're going to start getting into some more graphic tales. Yeah, my brother, who is now an Episcopal priest, decided he had to go to the bathroom, and nobody else wanted to stop at that particular time. So he slides the door open, and we learned something. You don't tinkle into the wind, especially if you're sitting behind the person that's doing the tinkling while the vehicle's going 50 or 60 miles an hour. We had several irritated Post members on that trip, thanks to his little shower that he provided us.
Oddly enough, that reminds me of Alan Edmonds and his vigil name, actually. He who looks with a red eye.
Yeah.
How did that name come to pass?
I think David probably had something to do with that. But Alan was always ahead of his time. The drinking age was at that time 18, but that didn't stop Alan. And there would be times that he might go on a little bit of a binge and have a red eye or something in the wee hours of the morning. I think that had something to do with it, but it could have been other things.
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit different. Something a little bit different.
I don't know anything about anything else other than that.
Let me redirect the conversation a little bit. And you had mentioned Sid Richardson and it just opening and so forth. I think the Post ended up playing an active role in the early years of Sid. Barry, you can maybe talk about that.
Yeah, very definitely. Of course, Sid Richardson opened for camping in 1969, and Alan Evans, Tom Carr, myself, John Hennessy. Actually, Father John Hennessy was my tent mate in '69 in Scoutcraft. But the Post had a real presence up there. Dean, of course, spent a lot of time up at Sid over the years, and that's.
I think Jerry Long was out there too.
Yeah.
There's quite a few bodies.
And over the years, in fact, I remember Dean bringing his ski boat out, because he wasn't a Post member at the time, to go skiing on the lake on the weekends, and we recruited him to join scouting at a later age.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. We actually, prepared the campsites that had never been used before. It might have been Hennessy and I were carrying a tent platform, going out across a little flat area, but the grass was like 2 foot high, and about a 6-7 foot rattlesnake was right where we wanted to put the tent platform, and that kind of halted the placement of the tent for a little bit.
Just drop it on the rattlesnake. I know we found a lot of rattlesnakes.
We those tent posts with the little spiked end made a great device to poke snakes in the head with.
I don't know, pre-week out there before the camp opened for the first time, we spent a lot of time laying plastic PVC pipe because there wasn't water out to the campsites at all, and so we were laying pipe along the main road that first year.
I was working at the waterfront, and we had to put a dock out there and find a place for the kids to go swimming. This was
Before they had a pool.
yeah,
out there.
they had no swimming pool, right? And so we had swimming, rowing, canoeing, all coming off the same area there off the lake, and so that was quite a bit of fun. And we opened up Camp 8 or 9 the first couple of years, and then some of us stayed on at camp and opened up the other camp, 9 or 10, whichever it was, and had to do the whole thing all over again, locate campsites. And at that time, Sid was the troops had it pretty rough. There was no dining hall. They did their own cooking, so we had to haul out. We had to haul out these cooking iron contraptions that weighed quite a bit. Anyway,
Well, while I've got this group here, I wanted to move on to a subject of one of the post trips from the early 70s, which was their canoe trips. I don't know if, are we 71, are we talking about Charles Summers canoe trip? Up to the Charles Summers canoe base. Who of this panel would have been on that trip?
Tom and I would be there.
Tom and Drew?
Is
Okay.
that the-
Homer, where's Homer?
Homer was there.
Bring Homer in here.
Alan was with us.
Okay.
I get
Why don't we get
it
Homer
all
in
gets
here?
blurred.
Chris Calloway,
Chris,
Okay.
Trey Yancey.
Well, if someone can start with the particulars of the trip, and I think there's more than one crew, wasn't there?
was that Robert? Was that the trip Robert went on? Robert Lewis and the young kid?
No.
Okay, that's the sixth one. Okay. Holtar was our guide.
Holtar was our guide. The trip really turned out to be a really great trip. Actually, I'd just moved to St. Louis at the time. They picked me up at Kansas City at the bus terminal there. Seemed we always pick people up at bus terminals around here. But they picked me up on the way up to Summers. And, we got into camp, and it was just remarkable. I mean, of course, everyone was 17 or older on this crew. And so it was a very senior crew.
We already had a reputation at that point too, because
Yeah.
about 8 years earlier, a pretty tragic event took place with members of our unit.
Yeah, we'll probably get to that here in a
Yeah.
little bit.
Some
But-
of those guys are out here already.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
But on this particular trip, we got into camp, and we were our usual robust selves, laughing and joking, cutting up and everything. It turns out there was a crew there from Boys Life that was looking for a group to go feature in the magazine. And somehow they selected us. I guess we kind of stood out. I don't know. But
It was just
Hey,
that,
we
that,
looked
that,
good,
that,
too.
that animal magnetism that we
We
generated.
looked
you know.
good. I mean, we were older kids. Most of us had been working out.
Some of us were quite photogenic too. But
yeah, some of us.
we didn't require makeup in those days either.
Good, cover up the knee.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, it turned out to be a really great trip once we got rid of those guys on the first couple of days.
We'd be paddling. It'd be late in the day, into the wind, and then they'd say, "Well, go back and let's do that again." We didn't quite get.
Oh
we
yes,
didn't
which
get-
brings us to the subject of us being on the cover of Boys Live.
Oh yeah.
Picture of Tom and I on the cover of Boys Live. And the reason I think that we were selected for that photograph and that shoot was because we both had such tremendous egos that we were the only ones that were willing to go through reshot after reshot after reshot of paddling furiously into a wind, and the whitecaps were probably 2 or 3 feet high, and a great picture, but we had to do it in several takes. But that is our 15 minutes of fame, Tom? Something?
Maybe. I think we'd actually been fishing.
Well, your time's up.
Time's
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd been fishing that day, and caught some fish. It was a morning shot or
That was
something.
one of the greatest times that I ever had camping out.
Well, didn't John Day go with us on
Yeah.
that trip? And,
Yeah.
and this guy is a cook. I mean, a chef. So we're having. We found some blueberries. We're having blueberry pancakes and fish for breakfast.
Well,
and
the story about the
peppercorns.
blueberries is that we went through this portage from hell in Holtar. His name was actually Paul Holte, but he had this big beard and he looked kind of Norwegian, so we called him Holtar. He got us lost. It's the first time he'd ever done that, I think. We were way deep into the wilderness there, and we ran across some blueberries, and so we picked them, and we had these big plastic bags, and we just tons of blueberries. We also ran across a group of Girl Scouts. Remember the Girl Scouts?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, well,
No.
you wouldn't. But we ran across this group of Girl Scouts, and we thought we would be pretty swift and cool. We offered them some of our blueberries, which was really a pretty nice thing to do. We were hoping that they would join us in our camp, but their leader probably wisely decided that they should paddle on to other places. But
When you say blueberries, that's a euphemism for
For the little wild-grown berry. And by the way, that portage was called Yum Yum.
Yum Yum. Oh, well, there you go.
The magazine, though, the Boys Life magazine, did have some photographs of the girls, and we entertained them at lunch or something that day.
Yeah. But that next morning, after the
gee,
blueberries, Tom and I went fishing in a little cove, and we hit a school of walleye. And every time we threw out our lure, we would have a strike and a hit, and we'd pull one back in. They hit so hard, they knocked the paint off of our lures.
Yeah, they chipped the paint completely off.
Yeah, we had, 21, 23 fish, something like that?
That-
So we got back
Sounds
to
like a
camp.
fish story to me.
And they were this big.
Yeah, we got back to camp, cleaned the fish, and we had fresh blueberries. We had blueberry pancakes and fresh fried fish. I mean, that was the best meal that you could ever have in the outdoors.
Can you still taste it today?
Oh, I can still
yeah.
taste it today, and I love that trip. I love that area. I've been back 3 times since.
Very
Just
good.
great.
We have a new member of the panel here that I'd like to have introduce himself and tell us what period of time you were involved and also what you're doing today.
My name is Mike Martin. I joined the post in the early fall of 1965. Came to the post from Troop 97, where I'd progressed through the ranks and been on the troop staff.
There you go.
I was in the post until about 1969. I was in college and the Army for a while. Came back to the post in 1975. I had been to an ordeal down at Camp Leonard right before I was discharged from the Army, and was recruited by Jack Boyd to agree to go with the troop to Arkansas and be the aquatic director. And this would have been in June of 1975. And had quite an experience with Jack on that trip, including catching the bus on fire. Worked at Worth Ranch in 65, Leonard in 66, Leonard in 67. Staff member with Rob at Sid Richardson Scout Ranch and Dean Ramsey and some of the rest of y'all in 75 and 76.
I very much remember that because I was 16, a very naive 16-year-old, and I ended up working for you down at the boat docks. And I remember you kind of smiling at me one day and saying, "Rob, this little gap in my tooth, do you know what that's for?"
Rob, let's not go into that, Rob.
All right.
You tell that story every time you have a chance to. Everybody's heard it, and we don't need to get into that at all.
We'll
We just
edit
don't
it
need
out,
to get
I'm
into
sure.
it. Rob was a very good lifeguard, but I didn't let him drink out of my water cup, so I had to write on the side of it. It was for the director only, so Rob wouldn't drink it. Also, Jim Goldthwait and I think in 75, skippered the aquatic school at Sid Richardson. I'm a lawyer here in Fort Worth and practice, I defend lawsuits for people. That's what I do.
Okay. I think you and I had talked one time about how things had changed in the post over the years, and you had given me a description of going to a post meeting maybe in the late 60s or something, and it being kind of a smoke-filled room or something like that?
Well, I was very young when I joined the post. I had just turned 14, I was about 14 years old. And the guys that ran the post were people like Muller and Larry Ivy, people of that genre. There was kind of a dichotomy in those days between the administration of the post and the Order of the Arrow officers. That kind of blurred over time. There were stand-up ashtrays in the post room. There were people like Chip Doss that would smoke a pack of cigarettes during a post meeting. Lots of post members smoked. Muller did not smoke. We couldn't get Muller to smoke. He just thought his mother would find out. The post was a smoke-filled room. And, of course, in those days, nobody thought anything about it. I mean, that was just something that happened.
Well, good. In terms of your observations of, like, the politics of the post during your time period, how can you tell us about that?
Well, do you mean the factional politics within the post, or the post, is it related to the council, or the post and the Order of the Arrow? Or
let's start with the first one, factional within the post.
Well, there were always,
do it without getting into trouble.
Yeah, there were always factions within the post. There was a faction that wanted to go in its own direction and not so much under the auspices of, let's just call them the officers of the Order of the Arrow, versus the people that had kind of come into the post and were the current officers of the Order of the Arrow. And some of the people that I'm talking about had joined the post rather late. They didn't grow up in the post. They came full blossom from other places and were substantially older. These guys were all in their 18, 19, 20, some of them 21 years old, because in those days they would let you hang with the post as a member up through your 21st birthday. In fact, I was at the Court of Honor when David Muller got his Eagle. It was at Bluebonnet Elementary School, and I think we were watching the clock, because if it had been 20 minutes later, David would have been 21 and eligible for his Eagle badge, because he just crawled in under the wire on a lot of levels. I don't know if I answered the question. I can't remember what the question was.
You sort of did. It was kind of a lawyer's answer.
I see.
Of
Okay.
sorts.
Okay. Well, I got to be careful. You know.
We've had someone else join us here on the panel. If you would please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Gary McDaniel. I kind of spanned 1957 to 62, 3.
Okay, is that with the post or the troop?
Troop, starting to like 12 years old.
Okay.
Up through high school. So
All
I
right.
did both. I started in 21, of course, over at university.
Okay.
Made the transition.
Well, very good. We'll be talking about that here in just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Mike, were you and Curtis in the post at the same time?
Well, I think we were, but we were trying to get acquainted before this, and he doesn't remember me, and I can't remember him, so I just have to tell you that we kind of crossed in the night. One of the things I claim credit for was the first Post 52 ski trip in 1966 was a camp out at my Uncle Pete Merton's ranch between Taos and Cuesta, New Mexico. And all the people have talked about the cheap trips that the post took don't understand what a cheap trip is until you've camped 3 days in the snow at Cuesta during ski season.
So actually camped?
Camped. We camped in 3 tents. They were surplus Air Force medical tents and had a white liner in the top. And they really weren't meant for people to sleep in them. And there's so much condensation in the tent that it would rain on us at night. Brother Kleinschmidt here was the driver, designated driver on the Taos ski trip, and I think he suffered in the rain with the rest of us in the tent.
Terrible.
Hi, Larry.
Hey.
Larry, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Larry Kleinschmidt. Well, yeah, everybody remembers me for cookies. I had a bakery in Fort Worth, or my parents did for a long time, and I always brought goodies. So everybody was happy to see me at Camp House and camping trips. And they looked for the gray box with the white insides with all the brownies. But anyway, that's the stuff I remember. I wasn't a member of Troop 52. I came over from Post 9. And I really don't. They asked me outside. They said, well, when did you move from Post 9 to 52? I said, well, I don't remember. 45 years ago? I don't know, a long time. I don't remember any of that. Here, you want this out?
Well, I wanted to ask, in terms of this first ski trip that the Post went on, what was the equipment that y'all used?
Well, this invasion was done in phases. There was a blue Chevy panel truck that was the property of Trinity News Company that was the principal transportation van. And it pulled behind it a pup trailer, a U-Haul rental pup trailer that had our camping gear in it. And then Jack and 2 or 3 other people, I think Ken Armstrong, came along in Jack's station wagon behind us, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're right.
Is that how it was?
Yeah.
And of course, somebody 21 had to drive. And Larry was one of the drivers, and I don't remember, was David Potts the other driver?
I don't know. I don't think Potts was 21 at the time.
Who was the other driver?
I don't remember offhand. I don't know. I was trying to think who was 21. Terry Wilkes.
He didn't go with us.
He didn't go with us on that one.
He didn't go with us. One of the best things was this left from Kyra's restaurant. And right before we got into the van, Johnny Day Whitten went inside and got a big quart of guacamole and a bag of tostadas. So we poured the guacamole out on this plate, and everybody ate their fill. When we got done, what were we going to do with the plate? So the bright idea was to open the back panel of the truck and throw this outside. Well, it just slapped right into the back of the U-Haul and made this perfect New Mexico sunburst of dried guacamole the rest of the trip. I don't think it ever came off, but I think it's probably there today.
It's one of the finest memories that anyone has shared with us today.
I remember you guys went off skiing, and I was feeling bad or something, didn't go.
And that I don't remember.
Were you on the trip also?
No. We have someone here who was. I forget who it was.
Okay. What did you have, like wooden skis or, you know what?
No, we went up and rented our equipment, which amounted to a nylon parka and skis. And of course, nobody really knew how to ski. I don't think anybody had been skiing in the Post. And there were all sorts of misadventures. Larry Ivy got his leg broken and had to come back supine in the back of Jack's station wagon. It was real wet because it was early in the season, and there was a lot of melt, and so everybody was just frozen and completely wet by the time we got done. So you went back to the ranch, to my Uncle Pete's place, and put on dry clothes. I don't think we had a running water shower or anything. And so for like 4 days or 5 days, we were just pretty
rank.
Pretty rank.
Yeah.
I think this is right before Larry went to Vietnam. I think you were on orders for Vietnam, weren't you?
Yeah, that fall.
Okay, we've got a series of new people that have joined us now. We'll kind of pass the microphone. We'll go down the line and have them introduce themselves. Let's go ahead and start here, please.
Hey, I'm Bob Colson. I was in the troop from 58 to 63, and I live in Indianapolis now.
Okay, what are you doing currently?
Oh, I'm a graphic designer. I own my own company and design books and newspapers and magazines for people.
Okay.
I'm Bob Simon, and I was in the troop and the Post from, I guess, 58 to 64. And I also want to say I also worked with Bob at Six Flags in 63. He was an artist, and I was a canoeist out at Six Flags. So we had all kinds of interesting adventures.
Okay, before you pass the microphone, are the canoes on tracks?
No.
Oh, okay.
Which makes it very interesting.
I always wanted to know that.
I always loved it because you could get 50 people paddling, and then we would angle into other canoes and run them into the bank, and it was an interesting experience. But I remember my first experience, if I may, as a camper. I was my dad was the Cub Master at Bluebonnet Elementary, and we were Webelos, and Jack came over and said, would y'all like to go camping? And everyone thought it was a great idea. And I think Jeff Craighead was talking about it. It might have been 56 was when this occurred, but we all went out to Benbrook Lake, and we had pup tents and camped out with the troop, and it was a rainy, windy night with thunderstorms almost all night. And the rain was so intense that one of the campsites got washed out. Most of the people were drenching wet, and the parents got up concerned, and they all came out looking for us. And they finally found us, and we were playing cards and drinking stuff in the tents, and we're only 12, but we were completely comfortable and out in the wilderness, enjoying ourselves. And here these poor people were marching through the rain, looking for us, and it was a great experience. I finally decided that that if you can do this in this kind of weather, and you're comfortable, and I can camp anywhere with these people, and I'll be fine. And it was my first experience with the troop, and left a lasting impression on me. And I've camped with them, for 5 or 6 years thereafter.
Well, good. We got one more here at the end. You'd introduce yourself.
I'm Ken Ruth, and I was a member of 21, I think, in '56, but I went on a Webelos camp with Jack to Worth Ranch. That was my first camping experience, and then I joined 21. I lived down the street from 21 for a long time. And I think I was off and on a member in the troop and post until I left Austin in '63.
Okay. So you were in both the troop and the post?
Yes.
And what do you do currently?
I'm an architect, and I live in Austin, Texas.
Oh, very good. Well, I think we've got a group here that appears to be that was in Troop 21, 52, late 50s, maybe early 60s. I want to talk a little bit about that time period. Does that include you a little bit?
Yeah, because I was in the 60, 59, 60, something like that.
Okay. So let's talk about that time period, and let's start it off by talking a little bit about Jack Boyd, who would have been the scoutmaster for both of those troops. And if any of you could give us kind of a general description of what your impressions were of Jack during that time period.
When you see Jack for the first time in a campaign hat and knee socks and shorts, and you say, "What hath God wrought?" But once you got to know him, it was a seamless whole. He was really quite a remarkable, unique person, and he would always come by the house around supper time. And this was true for many people. Remember that because he lived alone, and so the way he ate supper was show up and have people invite him to supper. but it was also a way of checking up on his boys, and it was remarkable to have that kind of attention from your scoutmaster. He was concerned about one boy, each boy around. So that's part of it. Well, maybe you have some memories.
Well, why don't I put one story out? I don't know how many people have seen it. I wrote an article or two for the '96 and the book, the post book. But I'll give you one of my experiences, and I think it's interesting. We used to hang out, of course, at Petta's and then Caro's, and in my experience, Jack enjoyed playing chess, and he and I would play chess. And after a few years, Jack started buying chess books, and we would play set games from these chess books that were Grandmaster Championship games that had won world championships and Grandmaster competitions. And I remember that Jack and I played, for a number of years, and I didn't really think anything of it. But then as I grew and went to Paschal High School, I joined their chess club, and I won the chess championship for Paschal as a member of the chess club. And I really didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, this is just something Jack and I do. And then after having thought about it for a few years now, it impresses me, as like Bobby was saying here. I mean, Jack had these sort of personal relationships with many boys on many different levels in many different endeavors. And it seemed like he had selected me because he saw some sort of nascent ability to play chess, which was something I guess he enjoyed. And we had great time doing it. And it turned into something that really made a difference in my life. And I guess you could say he was sort of my first and only chess coach. But, you know, and if I may go on, there was a '63 Explorer Olympics that stands in my memory. And it was a very interesting time. If I may, I'll just describe it briefly. Mike Hopkins was, I believe, the senior patrol leader at that time, or was involved in it at that time, and this might have been the post. Yeah, this was '63, I think. Anyway, we decided that we were going to go out and compete in the Explorer Olympics at Fort Walters. And Mike commandeered the Paschal swim team, and they got Scott McNeil's younger brother, Brian McNeil, who was on the golf team at Paschal. And I went, and my brother Bill went, and I think Herd Floor and a number of other people were there, but it was a rather select group of people. And basically with, I think, 9 or 11 people, it wasn't a large group, we won the entire thing because we nailed the swimming meet and the chess championship and the golf championship. And there were much larger groups, and they were more militaristic, like, I don't know if it's been mentioned, but Rudy Marcuse from ASL and his larger group of guys. But we, with a sort of a organizational effort from Mike Hopkins and some of the guys, put together this sort of cadre of people who had this sort of, these skills to compete in the different events. And I think even he had looked at what events there were and what it would take to win the thing. And that was kind of a recollection of how things were organized, I mean, at the boy level. And Jack never did any of that. He was there, and he drove and helped out. But we were on, we were on task under our own power, so to speak.
You didn't think Jack was involved, but he was. He had a way of evaluating a person and knowing what their lengths could be, and allowed you to think you got there, or made you do your own work. But I remember one summer he kept dropping by my house many, many mornings in a row to push me to get my first class, because I think without that you couldn't get into Order of the Era, and he knew that was the only thing that was holding me back, and I needed that little bit of a kick in the butt, and Jack was good at it with you thinking you did it.
Right. Larry, wanted to ask you just real quickly, you were a lodge chief. I don't recall the year offhand, but could you describe for us a little bit about the role of the post and or the troop in the OA at that time?
Well, I don't know, can't speak for the troop, but the post, which I was a member of, they were the backbone of the OA as far as having workers to do things. And it seems as if we had post meetings, but there were other meetings that took place that all revolved around OA work. I mean, we had to put out the Eagle Eye, and we used an old mimeograph system. Y'all remember those hand crank things? Which was a terrible thing, but we had to put out a publication. And it took almost everybody in the post to do it. Almost all the post members, I think, were in the Order of the Era. I don't believe there was any. Was there anybody who was not a member of the OA? Nobody.
I don't think so.
If somebody entered the unit and they weren't a member of the OA, the post just told them to go to the next ordeal.
Yeah, and they got tapped out and went on through. There was a great cadre to draw on as far as Order of the Air people, and if anybody failed, I mean, it seems as if 52 was the backbone of the OA on a lot of different things. And the reason was everybody knew everybody else. But the other thing I thought that made it really great is if somebody fell down on the job somewhere else, some other boy got either injured in football or something like that, we had a replacement available. I mean, we look over and say, Bobby Colson, can you do that? Or, oh yeah, I can handle that. There was I think a camaraderie, which was really great. And then there was also, these people were up to a challenge. That's what I liked about 52 is they took on challenges. And the OA was the biggest challenge of all.
Do you think that you would have run for lodge chief or been trained for that if you had not been in the post?
Wow. Impossible to become lodge chief if you weren't in the post.
Right. In fact, if I may, I ran against Larry for lodge chief in '63.
Okay.
And it was I withdrew in favor of Larry, and I became treasurer. But I remember, if you're talking about the post, the downstairs meeting room at the Trinity Episcopal Church. I remember doing the bar and they gave us a room, and we designed the room and built the bar, and I don't know how many other guys were involved in that, but
well, it's still there.
It was a boy effort throughout to create the room and the post room.
Okay.
I think what made the OA so vital back then is a lot of the precepts that Jack taught, which was boy leadership. You know, if you looked from the outside, you never saw Jack Boyd do anything. It was the boys that did things. He expected the boys to rise to the occasion, to take charge, to be in control, to go ahead and function no matter what. And he just, it seemed like took a back role in all that, which was great for an adult. And of course, we had some good adult advisors too. Walter Butler is the one that comes to mind, especially. Paul Joyce. Although Butler didn't come out of our group, he sure appreciated a lot of guys in 52. And Paul Joyce did come from 52, and he was a wonderful advisor, I thought. There were a lot of people that learned some of the techniques that Jack taught. And most of it was, the post was designed to teach people leadership. I don't think anybody backed away from that, And if we had two leaders in competition, well, that was great. Nothing wrong with that one.
Let me ask you, as a group, if anybody wants to address it, is Larry just mentioned that Jack expected the boys to run things or to organize them or expected them to do it. How did Jack go about conveying that expectation? How did you know that was what he expected?
This whole idea of boy leadership, which Jack, I believe, learned during World War II in Australia, it really captured his imagination and drove his work with scouting after that. But I think the tenets were you learn from experiences and you learn from older boys, and the experience of camping with Jack is so great. And I've seen a lot of scoutmasters at work. Most scoutmasters are right in the center of everything. Jack had this wonderful capacity to withdraw, and I'm sure he was working behind the scenes, but you weren't aware of it, not as a boy, and it wasn't always pretty, if you're doing stuff based on your own experience. But after a dozen such camping trips and so forth, he would put you in these situations in which you had to learn how to survive, and we not only survived but thrived and were comfortable and warm and dry and eating well, and the confidence was enormous that you developed over a period of time, and I think is what gave the troop and post a special quality of we can manage, we can do it, and it's always stood out in my mind.
Well, one of the Jack qualities, and again, you learned it from the older boys, but when you came in as a brand new young guy, and maybe there's a little chaos going on, when Jack put his hand up, silence, and you saw your troop leader or patrol leader and all that doing that, nobody would tell you twice. That's just the way it was.
Well, and how did that work? Because I'm currently involved in the scout troop, and Scoutmaster will put a sign up maybe, and it may take a while, but how was it that Jack was able to accomplish what you just described?
It was already there when I got there. I'm not sure how it got started, but it was just the respect you had for it. Behind his back, would call him Mr. Peepers and the guy with the short pants and all that, but he held an ultimate respect level that the guys, when he was there, you knew who was in charge, and yet you were doing the work.
Very good. We've had a couple of people join us that I'd like to have them introduce themselves and again tell us what period of time you were involved.
Well, I'm Jeff Craighead, and I was there from the time I was in the 10th grade till 64 or 65. And as people keep on mentioning here, Jack was really the recruiter. Most of you will hear him say that Jack showed up at a Webelos meeting or a Cub meeting or whatever. But he was the ultimate recruiter. I was in Troop 86 and had run across him, and as soon as I moved over here, over on Ruston Avenue, over in Wedgwood, next day Jack's out the door. So that's the type of recruiter he was. And what he did was he put together a cadre of older people. You moved into the leadership, and you had duties and responsibilities. Most of the time, they weren't even spoken. You just knew. And you were the eagle-eyed helper. You were there because as soon as somebody fell down or somebody needed a hand, you were there. And that's the way Jack ran that thing. It was fantastic.
And what are you doing currently?
I'm a real estate broker in California.
Okay. Did you travel all the way here to Fort Worth for this weekend?
Yep, sure did.
That's great. Okay, Alan?
Alan Johnson, and just retired from Worth Ranch, and I'm really pleased to be here and see all these folks.
What period of time were you involved in the troop?
I joined Troop 21, I believe, in 1958, and went with them, of course, with the 52, and through 63 at least when I entered the service, and back with them on and off as I could.
Okay, and I understand you were a senior patrol leader at one time?
Was in 63, I believe.
Tell
senior
me,
year in high school.
If you would, describe for us what it involved to be senior patrol leader of a troop with Jack Boyd.
I'm mostly taking up the slack. knowing the way Jack did it and what he wanted done, and you had that all figured out, like they said, and you just, anything he didn't get, which was a lot of stuff and implied, and you just had to see that it all happen, the details and stuff.
Okay.
Well, that's what made a good senior patrol leader.
We need to take a short break, and we'll come back.
It's true what they say about these lights getting hot. It sure have.